Welcome back. We are at it again. Another fun one today. So, made a bit of progress. I think what I'll do, I'll show you where things are up to, and then we'll sort of talk back through how the changes have worked. But we're kind of getting into actually starting toward building a game UI, where so far everything has been just flat, like placeholder stuff. That's getting exciting. So if I come in here and I run the game, you can see there's an annoying long startup now, which I will hopefully remember to get back to. But we now have some buttons. I mouse over them. They highlight and hover. You can see we have proper like ordering of things. This test button is in front of the start button. If I click that, it recognizes that the button on top was pressed. If I click start, we trigger a state change. If I click fun, it says a message. If I click exit, it takes me back to the menu. And this all worked as expected. These buttons in a grid are generated in a grid and all have appropriate handlers attached to them. All very exciting. And maybe the most exciting, I don't know how to show this very neatly, but if I like left click down, you see how it goes into like its active state, and I drag away, and then I release, it doesn't activate. Whereas if I come back to it, it does activate. So we've got the kind of, what's the right word to say this, like more sophisticated UI handling than just bounds check via the on click. So yeah, quite a lot happened since the last go. I have actually generated some notes with an LLM to just check that I don't forget anything. So the high level updates are a new immediate GUI setup, some tweaking to our text rendering, and then it says architecture refactor. I think that's fairly like grandiose for what it is. Basically, I'd been dumping loads of stuff in renderer and I pulled it out into different files to try to make stuff easier to find. This one I think is worth shouting out. I'm just gonna have a quick skim down the rest of the diff to see if there's anything else I care about, but I don't think there is. So this pos dim, oops, what's going on? Game2 pos dim. I've undone something we did earlier, which was that these all used to be raw union structs. So you can come in here and do raw union, set to be something like this. So vec 2f using. Right, you could do something like that. I've not got it exactly right. You can go back and find it in the old videos if you want, but what it meant is the kind of like way I was interacting with everything was to set the vector directly. My thinking was it made arithmetic easier to handle. It also turns out made everything more annoying to write. And I think I had literally one use of one of my generic arithmetic things, so I figured, you know what, let's undo that. So you might notice our stuff down here, so like grid rex, grid pos, is all slightly simpler. We might redo that later if I find the arithmetic is very painful, but we're not there yet, so screw it. So I think there are probably two changes to update on. One would be a to-do that I guess I've acknowledged in here. So that long startup time when I run this, you see it takes a good second or so. That's all font setup. So I found the fonts look significantly better at sort of various sizes if I generate them much bigger. And I think doing them much bigger just means that the operations are taking longer. I think this can be done much smarter, whether it's a straight up just smarter algorithm for how we like generate or use the shaders, or if it's generating multiple font atlases at the sizes we're actually going to use. But I think deciding on all of that will depend on what we use it for. So I'm going to go with this for now, and update it later. I've got an idea in here to basically pull this out into a separate program. So I'd have a program that builds the assets and bundles them all into one kind of binary. and then actually at compile time, I could include that into like my executables data, and have zero startup cost. Right, it would just launch. Which I think would be a significantly nicer way to do it, but we aren't there yet. So that's a to do for later, but that's what that long pause is. On to the more fun bit. So a lot of this is based off of Casey Muratori stuff I've been watching and reading. So he's got a video giving an overview of immediate GUIs and explaining how he would think about it. I've also found, I think, is it Handmade Hero 265? Check that, and I'll try to leave the link in the description. But he talks through adding a more complicated example of immediate mode GUI. And he's got some blogs where he talks about like his approach to sort of refactoring and extending a piece of UI logic that John Blow had written in the witness that he was extending. I'll try to remember to leave links to all of those in the description, but also very Casey Muratori pilled video today. The important change, I guess, then, is down here, where before we got past all of our initialization stuff, we get into the main loop, and then we would just draw a splat of, hard-coded example stuff. We now have a game state, which initializes in this mode. Why am I failing to Emacs? There we go. Currently, extremely simple. It just flips you from on the menu to playing the game. That will obviously get more interesting as time goes by. But if we skim down a little bit, what has changed? We've got some handling. So we now, on our global context, I might have to have a think about if this is worth doing. So this is a decision I made actually all the way back in Flectress, that stuff that is global that will appear in my app logic, I add into this global context so that I can see as I'm writing that it's global, right? It makes it very clear that, maybe you need to be mindful of what you're mutating, or that other things may be mutating this. Whether that's worth doing or not, I don't know, but you can see all these GCs, that's all they are. I've added this UI thing that we'll look at in a minute, and we've added a series of states. So we have hot, active, and triggered, other phrases you'll see through here. And that's about handling kind of, I guess, cross interactions across frames, the different states a UI component is expected to be put through. Now, I've only thought about that in terms of a button that you click. We'll have to wait and see, because I bet that a button you click gets us a long way in our game dev. It may be that if we hit something that's more complex, like I briefly thought about adding something you drag and drop, and maybe we'll do that later, but this was complicated enough. this took me a little while and a bit of thinking, so we will take this. But what is there to say then? So we'll go through those details in a second. We define some button dimensions, so I just make them all the same as each other. And then this is actually one of my big takeaways from reading those Casey Muratori blogs, was I was trying to think of how you would do some sort of like a layout algorithm, right? So you kind of imagine you do a pass where you work out where everything's going to be, and then another pass where you draw all the things. And really what he was saying is, he was like, the way I think about drawing graphics, I would start with kind of a cursor for where I currently am, and then move it around as it draws stuff. Almost if I were to describe to you how to draw this, I'd have to say, like, draw the title here, then move down, like to the bottom of the title, then move down by my padding, then draw the next thing there. And he's saying, kind of do that, right? So I'm going to go with that for now, because I think it does keep things like objectively simpler and very easy to reason about. I don't know. I think I'm kind of wary of the fact that, particularly, I guess, coming from a sort of web dev background, I'm used to working in React with a million libraries and all these other things. I think that, certainly from Casey's perspective, he would say that I've gotten very used to abstracting a lot very quickly. Everything's very smeared. I couldn't honestly tell you how half the things we are doing work all the way down. So this is me trying to kind of lean into that super simple mindset. So with that in mind, that's our cursor, UI pos. You come down here, and then this is the kind of like standard immediate GUI idea, right? That the code that is running through to be like, I'm in this mode, and because I'm in that mode, I need to draw a button. And if the button is clicked, then do this logic. So in this case, this is our start button. It prints and it changes the mode. Honestly, I think it's nicer than what I was doing in Flectress, where I was registering callbacks to entities in a buffer somewhere. Like, it was all very messy. This feels much neater. Again, we'll see how it extends. But that's the pattern. This get UID file and line thing is slightly interesting. So when we get into the how button is working, in fact, should we go look at button now? This is the kind of the main interesting thing we've done. So button is going to take an ID, which is just a number, pos dim z, which means the same thing they do everywhere, and then the text stuff that it needs to know for drawing text if it has it. We have this very simple bounds check, is cursor inside, and a bunch of logic that is trying to work out if the cursor is inside of my box, do I need to trigger a state transition? And then based on the current state, draw the box in a sensible way, and then we move on. And it all comes back to plumbing. So if we look in here, what is this saying? So if I pass the bounds check and the active ID is set to 0, so the global state says there is no active component, and the next hot state is behind me, then I become the next hot and I update the depth tracking. Or if the cursor is inside me and I am the active component, then I greedily hold next hot. And then, yeah, this down here I think is uninteresting. We get the actual drawing logic is in here. I've added this measure text function, which just does a lot of the same stuff that the string function does, but it just doesn't do the drawing. It just works out how big things are going to be. And then it can use that for positioning. So in this case, I think it does a bit of centering to put the text in the middle of the box it's in. And then, yeah, then we just return if it was triggered, is what I'm calling it, for clicked. So maybe it's worth talking about these different states. If I run the program again, so we have this global bit of UI state that has a hot ID, the next hot ID, the next hot Z, the active ID, and the triggered ID. So currently, nothing is hot, nothing is active, nothing is triggered. If I hover over, say, the start button becomes hot. When I left mouse down, the thing that is hot, if it is also the thing that I'm inside of, becomes active. And when I release the button, if I'm still inside the same bounds, then it triggers. That's what those three different states are. And it allows us to do things like, so if I'm over this one, I click, I drag away, I release, you see it doesn't activate the thing. Which I think is a kind of a standard UI paradigm that everyone in the world's used to now. To see how that's all wired in, I guess we go back to our main loop. You can see this is all kind of very samey, right? We have all of our if button. We now know that means that I was triggered. I now print the thing. The way I'm doing this is I've deliberately allowed one frame of lag between your interaction and the update. Now, I think you can get away without doing that, but it adds another step of work. So what I would quite like to be able to do is just draw anything, and as long as I set the right Z values on things, it will draw correctly. If you've looked at the kind of graphics pipeline end of this, it's all set up in a way where that's true, right? So we're using depth testing to make sure our draws happen in the right order, despite whatever order they get called in. I wanted the same to be true of my UI code. And we're not writing some sort of super speedy action shooter game where I think every frame of latency is an issue. So I'm hoping it's okay. But if we come back up here, what we do is essentially we go through and we say, okay, so for this frame, bear in mind we've got that UI state globally, so that's sat there from the last frame. I first say reset the triggered ID. So we don't want a click last frame to bleed into this frame. We call our flush inputs, and as it goes through inputs in the order it got them, it goes, did I get the mouse left down? If I did, and I have a hot ID that is not 0, it becomes the active ID. If I get a mouse up, so you've released the mouse button, and I've got a hot ID and an active ID, and they're all the same as each other, that becomes my triggered ID. So that's how you get the down and up within the same box constraint working. And it consumes that active state, so it just triggers the one time. If you do something weird where you like spam lots of events within a single frame. We come down here, we set up our state for the next one. So we have a next hot ID that we hold on to. That becomes our hot ID. We reset next hot ID and next hot Z, which are the things we use for that checking we've already seen. And then we run through those button calls. Right, you can imagine as the game gets more complicated, we'll have more of these like UI elements. We're kind of building out like a component library that will all work like this, hopefully. And then yeah, it just runs through. I think what is pretty obvious is that this won't scale particularly nicely as these screens get more complicated, but you can imagine that what you end up with is you pull out a function that is like draw the main menu. That draw the main menu will have some layout bit of state on it that it will then use to like move around these X and Y values. Stuff like moving the cursor each time you draw the button. If the page is very formulaic, I think can be built in more nicely. But I wanted to start very blunt like this. Again, in part inspired by Casey's blogs. I think one of the points he makes is about, is it called continuity of granularity? I think it's his wording. Where he's like, write the really low level version first, and then don't delete any of that capability. Just keep extending and on top of it by compressing things down by grouping stuff that's common into kind of helper functions. But don't delete those lower level things, because it means every time you want to break out of your standard pattern, right? If you have a standard pattern that covers 95% of cases, that last 5% can still use the old thing, and it all integrates together very smoothly because that's the way it was written, right? You can't get the wrong mental picture and then produce the wrong thing. So we're going with that. We'll see how we go. Just for clarity, these values in here are just numbers. They can be anything, but I just thought it probably looks better if I start off using a small set of numbers. So they're just numbers. The font we've seen before, that's just a string. These Z values are probably a thing that, again, later on we're going to have to work out how we're going to manage them. But for now, I'm just hard coding them in different places. You probably end up defining like layers, right? Where on each of these, like draw the main menu, it will have like the set of layers of things it knows it's going to draw. So that these become more self-understandable. So all of these are really boring, except for this UID bit, right? So you can imagine when I first wrote this, all of these were right. Like the first button was 0, the second button was 1, yada yada yada. I tell a lie. I think the first button had to be 1 because we treat the value being 0 as no value in our logic. So that's worth remembering. This is an idea I have stolen in its entirety from Handmade Hero, and actually is a thing that I think we cannot do as nicely as you could have done in C, which is interesting and slightly sad. Another reason to be excited for Jai coming out, I think Jai would let you do it. But basically, this hash file and hash line, I think in C macros, there's a corresponding thing that's normally written like that. But basically, you're saying it's a compiler directive to say insert the current file name and the current line number here. And it's just a really quick way to say, I need a way to identify this button uniquely that is distinct and different from that button. You take advantage of the fact that, well, for them to be distinct, that they're generally going to be in different places in the code. So we use that and we put it through a hashing function to turn it into a number, and that's the ID that we use. That's obviously not always true. So if we come down, this is why we added that grid. If we look in here, you see we have to do get unique identifier, and we pass in a number that I'm calling a differentiator. I might be able to come up with a better name for that, but sorry, I'm going to cough. But that's what I've gone with here. And the thinking here is, well, actually, the call in the code here isn't unique because I'm inside these loops, but I know that, right? So I can construct a number here that will be unique for each of those calls, and I can add that to the thing that I use to generate my hash, and it should give me something that's unique. So we jump in here, and the way I've done this is I've used a thing I've not used a whole lot, is Odin's explicit function overloading. So I think in C is, or I don't think C has this, but I think C++ does. You could write just get UID with two different signatures, and it would compile them as two different variants of the same thing. Like it automatically overloads the value, which is, I guess, useful in places, but also error prone. So Odin makes you do it very explicitly like this. So you say get UID overloads these two other functions, and then you call whichever of them matches. So the with differentiator version is, I guess, our base one, right? This one just calls into it with a value set. And then we use this XXH3 hashing algorithm that, like so many things, this is built into core Odin. So if you want to use it, that's the import. And what do? I XOR together your line number and your differentiator you pass in, and then I use that to hash as my seed to hash the string value, which seems to work. So that's pretty good. But yeah, that's how those different values are all able to be handled differently. So if I come in here and I get rid of that value, what you should see if I go and click the grid is they should all act like a single button, basically. There you go. So you see they all highlight at once, and if I click them, you see they all ping at once. So just to show it's actually doing something. Whereas if that goes away, we wait for the slow build, you see that's now actually correctly identifying which button we're pressing. So, all very good fun. I think that's everything that I did. Let me go check my README notes. What is there to say? Yeah, I kind of, at first, the version I thought of for this is I was going to be writing some sort of like Flexbox-like positioning algorithm, but like I say, I'm drawing inspiration from Casey's blogs and avoiding doing that. That feels like complicating it earlier than is needed. Yeah, that's all in there. I guess if these notes are interesting to you, I guess then I'll push this up as like dev 007 as a tag, so you can go check it out easily if you want to have a look. I've not read all of these, but I can say for a fact I think the first like 3 or 4 of these were very relevant and very useful information. That Handmade Hero episode was also very useful. Actually inspired me to go and pay Casey his $15 to go and get access to all jump around it. That's all good and fun. But yeah, we've now got something that feels like working code. Things to do next haven't really changed, I don't think. So I'll have a think about whether I want to look into this tinting business or profiling as my next thing. But hopefully it's starting to feel like we're approaching actually building a game now, right? Like you could imagine if we weren't fussed at all about it looking nice, which we're not for the first version of this, like we've got base interactions now, right? And my intention for simplicity's sake is I want to build the entire thing kind of mouse driven first, and then we'll go back and add keyboard support for controls. Just that way around seems the easier, right? That you're adding button shortcuts for, or you're adding key shortcuts for buttons that are already programmed, rather than having to build UI to support keyboard controls that you've already built. So yeah, I think that's the video. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Like I say, this sort of skimming through it in 20 minutes, I don't think doesn't quite get across how much I had to scratch my head trying to work this out. I think the immediate GUI stuff is I don't know. It's kind of deceptively simple once you see it all like laid out, but it feels very counterintuitive. Or at least I found it felt very counterintuitive sitting down to write it. But there's the value in doing it yourself. So yeah, I think that was all I've got for today. So I will catch you in the next one.